So, let me give you some context. I am a 17-year-old girl with an older brother named Jacob, who is 26 years old. Jacob's been an important part of my life, more like a father figure sometimes, given that he's quite a bit older than me. He's engaged to a woman named Amber, who is 27 years old and currently pregnant with their first child. They've been together for 9 years. Our family is quite close-knit, and since Jacob and Amber are planning their wedding and expecting their baby soon, they've been staying with us while they look for a bigger apartment. Amber and Jacob have had a tough time financially, trying to save up and plan for all the significant changes coming their way, so my parents generously allowed them to stay with us. It's been nice having them around, and even though Amber doesn't have a great relationship with her parents, who disapprove of her relationship with Jacob, she's managed to grow close to our parents, considering them more like family. With my 18th birthday coming up next weekend, my parents have been very enthusiastic about the preparations. They're really pulling out all the stops, which made me excited and grateful. We decided to throw a celebration by inviting some of our relatives over for lunch at Olive Garden and to have a dinner at our home later that evening. To mark this special occasion, I decided to buy myself a new dress, a corset belt, and some flats, so I could look and feel my best. Even though my parents were already covering the costs of the lunch, dinner, cake, and gifts, the expenses were adding up, and I wanted to contribute by paying for my outfit. I took pride in having saved up enough to cover the cost of my dress and other accessories, and sharing this news with my parents was met with encouragement and love, reflecting how they always made it a point to support my sense of independence. In our family, birthdays are pretty meaningful, and while Amber's reactions towards my special day plans seemed a bit off-putting, I didn't give it much thought initially. She made a few comments about how all of this seemed excessive for just one person, especially since she never celebrated her 18th birthday with such flair. The remarks struck me as unusual, mainly because she knew that Jacob had a big bash with a room rented out at our local community center when he turned 18. Despite this undercurrent of tension, I tried to brush off her comments with the thought that it must just be because she's accustomed to simpler celebrations herself. After all, any past birthdays she's spent with us were pretty low-key, and maybe she underestimated how involved our family could get when it came to celebrating milestones. Yet, there was a part of me that felt there might be more beneath Amber's comments, but I was determined to enjoy my birthday celebration, hoping everything would get sorted out by the end of the weekend. Little did I know, that mix of excitement and apprehension was just the beginning of a string of unexpected events that would unravel soon enough. As my birthday approached, I noticed some tension in the house with Amber. It wasn't anything too upfront, just small remarks and a vibe I couldn't quite put my finger on. At first, when Amber found out about the birthday plans, she would make these little comments about how everything seemed a bit over the top for just one kid. It was these little remarks that made me feel a bit uneasy, considering everyone else around me was just happy to see me excited for my birthday. I reminded myself that Amber didn't have the best relationship with her own parents, and maybe it was a sensitive topic for her. Amber had been around for many of my more subdued birthday celebrations in the past, where we kept things simple and within a family circle, but this year felt different. Not just for me turning 18, but also because I saw it as a celebration of entering a new phase of adulthood. Jacob, my brother, was fully aware of how big a deal our 18th birthdays were in the family, largely because he experienced the same thing. When he turned 18, there was no holding back. We had a room fully booked at our local community center with all the trimmings, and celebrations went on until late in the night. Maybe he didn't tell Amber about just how festive we can get. The atmosphere felt celebratory, but Amber seemed to carry an air of reservation around the whole thing, which I couldn't quite understand. Then, there was this one day when she came into my room on a completely unrelated matter, and for a moment, she saw my birthday dress hanging on the closet door. Her eyes lingered longer than expected, and in a fleeting moment, I caught a look that I couldn't place entirely. Was it envy? Discomfort? I wasn't sure, but I couldn't shake it off as simply a fleeting glance. You'll have to understand that Amber, reaching this milestone in her life with a wedding soon approaching and preparing for a new baby, was perhaps running into some turbulence of her own. Her life was changing swiftly, and maybe these changes made her reflect on how she spent her own 18th birthday. Amber's comment about not celebrating her 18th birthday the way I was planning mine lingered in my mind like a mosquito in a quiet room. It was a statement that was loaded, as much with the past as it was with unfulfilled expectations. I wanted to believe she just hadn't grasped how we did things as a family, because if she did, surely she'd remember just how we too celebrated Jacob, would she not? Nonetheless, I chose to focus on the joy of what was coming. I told myself that maybe I was just reading too much into it, that her odd remarks and stark demeanor were perhaps reflections of her own experiences. Whatever troubled waters lay beneath the surface of our interactions, I figured they would settle down in time. I was determined to not let anything cloud the joy of my upcoming celebration. So, I pushed these thoughts aside allowing the excitement of my birthday plans to fill my head instead. Despite the little clouds of tension that lingered above, I tried to keep an open mind about Amber's position in my brother's life, understanding the pressures she must be facing herself. Yet, I couldn't ignore the gentle simmer of unease, quietly hoping things would smooth over naturally before my special day arrived. Yesterday was a day I will never forget. I came home to the sounds of my parents' voices echoing throughout the house, not in the joyful tone of planning and excitement that I was used to, but in tones that were harsh and filled with an urgency that put me on high alert. The scene that unfolded before me as I walked into the living room felt surreal. My mom and dad were both standing across from Amber, who looked more distressed than I had ever seen her. Confusion initially clouded my mind, but as I stepped closer, I saw the ruby-red soles of my new shoes, now jagged and torn, lying discarded like forgotten memories of a happier time. I felt a gasp escape my lips, my eyes conveying the swirling tempest of emotions raging within me. My dress, the symbol of my pending adulthood and the core of my birthday celebrations, was draped across the arm of the sofa, ribbons cruelly snipped, lace ragged like a battlefield's aftermath. My parents' accusing voices filled the room, their words a blur against my racing thoughts. I was told that my mom had caught Amber in the act, which, upon initial comprehension, struck me like a physical blow. How could this have happened? And what possible reason could she have had? The dress and shoes were meant to mark a milestone, a moment I had been eagerly awaiting. Now, both lay in tattered pieces, their former beauty marred beyond recognition. I wanted to understand, to piece together the fractured shards of this incident into a mosaic that made even the slightest bit of sense. With a hesitant yet firm tone, I asked Amber directly why she would do such a thing. The question hung in the air, charged with the weight of the situation, as if the words themselves could coax out a confession or an explanation that would contextualize this behavior. Amber met neither my eyes nor my parents', and silence ensued. It wasn't the peaceful silence of understanding or reconciliation, but a tension-laden stillness, the kind that fills a room when everyone is unwilling or unable to break it. We remained trapped in this uneasy quiet until the clock marked an hour's passage with mechanical indifference. The front door swung open, and Jacob's entrance could have been like any other, had it not been for the emotionally charged atmosphere that engulfed him as he stepped inside. He instantly sensed the storm he had walked into, and as my parents filled him in on what had transpired, I saw the shock ripple across his features like the first note of thunder heralding a downpour. I watched as his gaze shifted between us, his expression a cocktail of disbelief and disappointment that matched my own tempestuous feelings. I was desperate for some form of validation or accountability, hoping that Jacob would join my parents in seeking restitution for the damage his fiancée had caused. My parents firmly insisted that either Amber or Jacob cover the costs of the destroyed items. Her actions had inflicted more than just a tangible loss. They had unapologetically crossed a boundary, a breach of trust that demanded reparation. At that moment, I expected a swift resolution, imagining Amber's admission of whatever possessed her to act this way, followed by an apology and a promise to make things right. Instead, Amber's voice finally broke the silence, each word tinged with defiance and desperation as she refused to meet our demands. She claimed the funds required to reimburse me would have to come from their baby fund, a notion she clearly deemed unreasonable. The mention of her strained home life and unresolved issues with her parents added a layer of emotional complexity to the situation, but it was not sufficient to justify her actions. The air grew thick as the argument swelled, igniting between my parents and Amber, with Jacob caught in the crossfire. I could see him searching for a foothold of logic to grasp, something to rationalize the chaos between family loyalty and the woman to whom he had pledged his life. His defenses for Amber quietly pointed to her condition, citing pregnancy hormones as the supposed catalyst for her behavior, but my parents weren't moved by this line of reasoning. The situation was not just about material loss, it was about respect and boundaries, about understanding that trust once broken could not simply be brushed aside. I stood there, my heart a churning sea of scratching disappointment and lingering disbelief, the remnants of my birthday plans scattered both physically in the room and metaphorically in my mind. Amidst the piled debris of fabric and fallen expectations, I was left with the unsettling realization that the rift now extended beyond ribbon and lace to the very fabric of the relationships within our family. My parents stood firm, holding their ground in the face of Jacob's pleas, their voices firm but steady as they laid out the clear and unambiguous condition. Either they or Jacob had to make amends. It wasn't just about replacing the material items that had been lost to Amber's impulsive actions, but about restoring a sense of fairness and justice. The tension in the room thickened, words filling the air like a dense fog. Amber, however, remained silent and aloof, her eyes occasionally meeting mine, only to quickly avert with a mix of guilt and defiance. Jacob's position between his fiancée and our parents grew increasingly precarious, and he struggled to find a resolution that would satisfy all parties. It was clear he was torn, his loyalty to Amber pulling him in one direction, while the expectations for accountability and family respect tugged in the opposite. It was during this standoff that Amber abruptly declared she would not tap into their baby fund, expressing that it was irrational for everyone to hold her actions to the standards we did. Her statement, at once brimming with self-pity and indignation, did little to sway anyone's opinion. Instead, it further catalyzed the brewing storm, turning it into a verbal tornado we were barely managing to endure. My father tried to maintain calm, signaling for a moment of verbal ceasefire, but my mother couldn't mask the disappointment lining her face. She looked at Jacob, willing him to consider the larger picture, our history as siblings, and the bond that should render incidents like this manageable within the context of care and familial responsibility. Even as Jacob attempted to mount one last defense, casting frantic glances between all of us, the undeniable reality was that Amber had trespassed on trust, and the balm of hormones and her past grievances was simply not a panacea for the violation of that trust. My parents reiterated their demand for repayment, emphasizing the non-negotiable nature of this requirement. The room felt alive with an energy that was both reluctant to explode and simmering beneath the surface, threatening to break out at any moment. The responsibility lay squarely on Amber and Jacob's shoulders to decide their next move, and the air was thick with anticipation of their response. Eventually, things escalated when my dad had reached the limit of his patience. He stood firm, his voice steady yet commanding, and made it clear. If there was no intention to reimburse for the damaged articles, Amber and Jacob would need to find alternative accommodations. It was not a suggestion, but a decision, born out of a sense of principle and fairness. Though sorrow tinged his words, a reflection of the family's upheaval a single impulsive act had caused. My mom stood behind him, her silent support doing nothing to soften the finality in his edict. Amber seemed taken aback, as if she genuinely believed that the gravity of the situation would somehow ebb away with enough protest. But when my mom handed them a small sum for gas money, the reality hit, unwelcome and stark. Their whispers turned to urgent discussions, and within half an hour, they started packing. Jacob's eyes caught mine, a silent plea residing there, hoping for some reconciliation or sudden change of heart that wasn't forthcoming. Yet, my own resolve was steeled. No matter the circumstances, accountability needed to be held. He seemed weighed down by disappointment, not fully comprehending the consequences of enabling behavior, perhaps hoping this was all a nightmare he'd wake up from. Their departure was tense, heavy with unspoken words. The bag seemed like a physical representation of the distance rapidly forming between us, laden with decisions and the unseen paths of our without solving this dilemma. It wasn't just clothes they packed up, but a world where apologies and mending could have drawn a different outcome. As they left the house, the door closed with a weighty finality, both a physical closing and an emotional bookmark that was yet to be overcome. Now, I'm left with mixed feelings about everything that happened. On one side, there's this hollow sadness that lingered after their departure. My brother's pleas echoed in my mind as I pondered the potential ripple effects of this conflict. Was I being too harsh? Could I have urged my parents to act differently? Yet another part of me understood completely the importance of setting boundaries and demanding respect. I wondered how Amber truly felt. Was it really all about the baby fund, or was there something deeper she wasn't sharing? It felt wrong to be caught in this standoff, where family ties interwove with strained interactions. Jacob's texts were both a tether to the life I knew and a reminder of how much things had changed. In pursuing fair treatment, I feared the costs that might come with it. Costs that extended beyond money into the realm of familial love and trust, which seemed fractured by the night's events.